Hi, I'm Mike Dilk and you're listening to the Relax Back UK show, the show that explores all kinds of health topics relevant to you, your family and your friends. Each week I talk to expert guests from a range of backgrounds to inform and entertain you. So please do join the Relax Back UK family and stay tuned.
Hi, and thank you for joining me on the Relax Back UK show this week. I chat with Safi Abdi, who specialises in helping people with a difficult relationship with food to the point where they may have had bariatric surgery, such as a stomach band fitted so that their stomach can't hold as much food. Now, Safi is a refugee from Somalia, and she was 8 when the civil war there started, and her issues with food began when she was in a camp during the war.
So there's a lot of women, a lot of children, and they will throw bottles of water and bread twice a day, and all we got is what my mother could catch.
Then, as a refugee in the UK, she found life difficult and struggled with the relative abundance of food, amongst other things, I may add.
Food was my best friend. It would give me a warm cuddle, and I remember school dinners, especially in the 90s, were, custard and loads of, really starchy, comforting food. And that was all I looked forward to.
So please do stay tuned for an extraordinary story. Thank you.
This show is cool!
After suffering extreme hunger due to war in Somalia, and then going on to have a poor relationship with food and undergoing surgery to reduce the size of her stomach, Safi now helps people who are suffering from similar issues that she did. She specialises in helping those with a difficult relationship with food to the point that they may well have had bariatric surgery.
Hi, Mike. Thank you so much for having me.
And so did I kind of get the introduction right?
Yes. I always say that I specialise in a very niche area, which is people who've struggled with prolonged high BMI or prolonged weight struggles, and then have had weight loss surgery usually, and have had an undiagnosed disordered eating or eating disorder, and it wasn't picked up before the surgery, and then usually it comes back after the surgery and then starts to create more trouble. So those are the people that I work with, but I work with people from across the board who have had, anybody who's been on a diet, off a diet, at least, 5 times. There's usually an underlying reason why you can't stick to, or why you can't achieve the weight loss that you want.
Okay. And so you're actually very well placed to help with this kind of stuff. In fact, in some ways, you've got the very best qualification to help. So can you just kind of describe to us kind of what that is and kind of where you came from a little bit? Sure.
And I always say to people, my mess has become my message. So just a little bit about me, my background. And I always put in a bit of a trigger warning here, especially in this climate. I'm going to talk about hard things. But at 8 years old, overnight, a war started in Somalia. And, the bombs and the sirens, and we ran out in the middle of the night, which is, my mom with 4 children, and literally shopping bags of clothes. And
so this is a civil war in Somalia, yeah?
Yes, in the 90s, yes, late 80s, early 90s. And I'm sure most British people, or any, people remember, if you're old enough, you remember that on TV. But, and then we would spend the next weeks and months trekking on foot from one village to the other, to one town, and then we would, we got caught at one point, and we were put in a refugee camp before we were rescued by the Red Cross. And then in that journey, that's where I pinpoint my the perfect storm for disordered eating. We went weeks. My mum had 4 kids. I was the oldest at 8 years old. So my mum would have to, so we were literally sardines in this big field. Well, yeah, I think it was a field. And we would sardine in. So there's a lot of women, a lot of children, and they will throw bottles of water and bread twice a day. And all we got is what my mother could catch.
So how many people were in this kind of enclosure?
I've only got, and I spoke to my mother's not here anymore, but at 8 years old, sometimes I think, oh, maybe my memories, but we were sardined, and it felt like the field went on and on and on, and there were so many of us, and we were the lucky ones because the men were getting, taken off the cars, and men with huge guns, the army would come in and take the men off. And, a lot of, so at 8 years old, I can still remember seeing, bodies on the side of the road. And
essentially, this is a very difficult, very traumatic time.
Yes.
Not something an 8-year-old should or anyone for that matter should be dealing with.
Indeed. So with regards to food, I think that's where it all started. And the fact was, so we were rescued, luckily, by the Red Cross, and we were brought to London. And then I remember my first meal being landing in a chip shop, a very British chip shop. And my first meal in England was a portion of chips. So huge, really traditional chips. And my love for carbohydrates was born. So that now I know that's a perfect storm of my body almost entering into starvation mode. And then finding this, palatable, comforting, high fat, amazing love for carbohydrates. So my biology along with my emotions, and that was a perfect storm. And then I would go the next 5 to 6 years. I missed a lot of formative years at schools, and I looked different, I sounded different, I didn't everything was different about me. So I was bullied at school. Food was my best friend. It would give me a warm cuddle, and I remember school dinners, especially in the 90s, were, custard and loads of really starchy, comforting food. And that was all I looked forward to. I had dyslexia. School was very hard for me. So food had become my best friend, everything, that I needed and wanted at that time. And I'm really grateful for that. But as I got older, I realized, everybody really, I've noticed that my friends were worried about their weight. And they were a lot slimmer than me. I went to school with a lot of South Asians, and they're very petite in nature anyway, and slim girls. And then I realized something's not quite right here. And
can I just ask a question here? So, what was this kind of relationship with food? Was it caused by sort of potentially two things? First of all, as a young child, an 8-year-old, actually, you were really hungry and kind of, you suffered greatly from a lack of food. And does that cause kind of changes in your body? So your body actually craves carbohydrates and that kind of thing. And then also you've got the emotional side of things of being concerned about where your next meal is coming from. Were those two things working there?
Correct. It's spot on, Mike. I know we know something about set points. There's a set point theory. Anybody can Google it. And our body has a point where it wants to keep us alive. That's all it cares about. And if it's threatened, and we've been at to wait for to 8 years old, I was at a stable weight, and my body was, chugging away nicely. But then it almost entering into starvation mode had triggered that. So my hunger hormones would have increased, my metabolism would have decreased, my body would have been working really hard to never return to that spot again.
Sure.
Because as far as it's concerned, as far as my brain was concerned, I almost died. So now it's going to store everything, to make sure that we don't get into that stage ever again.
All right. So now you're a teenager in London with all this traumatic past.
Yes.
Which actually is probably not all in the past. It's kind of still with you to some extent.
Sure. Yep. Yeah. And everybody's just obsessed about weight. And I'm also, a Black woman, and my body is not designed for, the Western, which has got a different shape, but to fit into the Western ideals. And all I was surrounded by, Mike, was magazines, where celebrities' cellulite was circled. And that was very normal. And then I got into the world of dieting. I discovered clubs like Slimming World and Weight Watchers, and then the more money I earned, the more money, the more the more expensive or the more elaborate dieting I would.
How old were you at this stage?
So I think I started noticing maybe about 14, so teenage years. I started to notice the diet. My mum didn't speak English, so I didn't really get that from my mum. That usually, and now I know with a lot of clients, it's usually moms and aunties that kind of get them through that dieting, introduce that dieting gateway to them. But I didn't have that. But I would search. So in my late 20s, my early 20s, I got a job. Money started. I had money, and then that's when the internet. I guess we were all really starting to use the internet, and I had it on my phone. So that was it. I was Googling, always looking out for a new diet. It would only last maybe 3 months, and then I would lose, I would lose a number of stones or, pounds, and then I would relapse, and then I'll regain some extra for good measure. So that continued, and then yeah, the more money I earned, the more expensive the diets became, the more extreme they became. I started looking at, the dark web for things that were, dangerous pro-ana sites, and it got to the stage.
I don't know what that is.
Oh yeah, just we don't usually like to talk about it because don't want to trigger anybody. But there are sites that are there to tell you how to develop an eating disorder. And they're called pro-anorexia sites, and it's very dangerous. And there's a lot of girls out there, and when you're vulnerable and you're desperate, there's a community out there. And
so, what is the objective of these sites? Are they trying to sell something, or
no? It's started by the users. It's just usually young girls on there just telling each other tips and hints on how to not eat.
And that's it. It started by these girls, these women.
Yes, usually girls. Yeah.
All right,
usually.
and that is the sole objective. There's nothing, no darker kind of trying to sell something or. Okay.
It's how to. It's really scary because some of those girls are starving to death, sadly. But then I remember thinking, I can't even do this properly. I can't even, because I would say, I remember going for weeks and everybody reminds me, and all I had was cucumber, but I would fall off. But one thing about my body was the fact that my body and physiology and biology had changed because of what had happened to me. So my body was always going to work harder at keeping me off these track, and would always bring back, wanted me for the binges. So I guess that's when I developed the binge eating disorder. I would binge and I would restrict, and I would binge and restrict. So that was my journey until my 30s, really. And then
sorry. This isn't my world. I just want to. So the binge eating, you would eat a lot and then make yourself vomit.
No. So I didn't have that. That's So some people purge, and I didn't purge. So what I would do is I would restrict all day, and then within a window of 2 hours, I would eat so much. To sometimes I would be sick, not because I made myself.
Right.
So there's bulimia. There's people who will physically go and make themselves sick after every meal, but because I ate so much, I was sick. So that's the difference between binge eating disorder and the other version of it. But for me, so that's what I would do. I would go all day with the best intentions of not eating. I would say 7 days, because in the magazines and TV, there was also TV programs, Mike. Was it super skinny, super fat, super skinny? I can't remember if you remember, but I would get tips. I would get my notebook, and I would make my notes. And it was around me. It was everywhere. It's not like today where, it was around me all the time. And then I just got bigger, Mike. I just got bigger, more depressed, until it started really impacting on my mental health, my physical health. And
are you getting any help? Any help from a GP or any professional help?
I went to see my GP, and I said to him, I've tried every diet. I've got a personal trainer. I sat down and I was honest with him about everything, and he prescribed me antidepressants. So no signposting to anybody, no charities, nothing at all. He gave me antidepressants and told me you just need to eat less and move more. And I hate that now. That, that saying I hate with a passion.
Yeah.
Because
so antidepressants, I mean, that doesn't, okay. So as I've said, this isn't my world, but I can think, hang on a moment, that doesn't seem like that's the problem.
Because he had no idea. I have a sister who's a GP. She said, they got half a day on nutrition, let alone eating disorders. So he had no idea. He just didn't want to see me cry. Just, I cried, and he just I've got no anger towards him, but just a lack of information. And now working in this field, I know he could have there's the leaflet he could have just given me to a charity.
Sure.
But then I was back Googling the dark web again. So in 2014, I was really desperate. I reached about 19 stones, which in pounds, Mike, I'm really bad at pounds, but in pounds would have been quite high.
Okay, well, let's just keep it in stone.
Okay, we'll keep it in stones.
I'm a 6 foot man, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm a bit overweight. I could easily lose a couple of stone, and you wouldn't look at me and think he's unhealthy. And I'm just under 15 stone.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
How tall are you?
And I'm 5'4".
You're 5'4". Okay. So yes. I think we can get the message there. Right? You're 5'4", and you were 19, so that's 4 stone heavier than I am at the moment. Okay. Yes. So
carrying a lot of
overweight
extra
significantly.
Yes, yeah, indeed. In BMI, I'm sure I was morbidly obese, but so my back, I started developing sciatica. It started to really impact not only my psychology but my physiology and my physical health. So then I remember at some point somebody saying, "Oh, you can get your mouth stapled." I don't know if it's a joke on TV, and then I thought, "Oh, what's this mouth stapling? Let me Google it." And that's how I discovered weight loss surgery. Can you sense my desperation? I was, I thought there was an actual thing out there. So, and then before you know it, within 2 weeks, I had Googled weight loss surgery. I had found a company that did gastric bands, and within 2 weeks, I was in Belgium having surgery.
Okay. First question. I don't really know what a gastric band is. And are there other sorts of weight loss surgery as well?
Yes. So there's several types. So the gastric sleeve is currently what they do, and it's called a gastric sleeve because it's almost like a sleeve. So it's just they remove quite a lot of your stomach until you're left with this sleeve tube kind of thing. And then there's a gastric band, which literally puts a band on top of your stomach, so you're only left with a little pouch on top.
So this is physically making your stomach smaller?
Yes. With surgery and keyhole now because it's advanced so much, but very much surgery, So I went for the gastric band because I thought that it was the less dramatic of the procedures. And I remember, and also knowing deep down that I wanted to have children, and knowing
was this keyhole surgery, or was this a major? So this was what date was this? How long ago was this?
So 15th of May 2015. So okay. I remember that day. My life did change, and I'm grateful for it. And then so I got the band. Everything was great. Before I left the hospital, the sciatica had disappeared because I had lost 1 stone very quickly. And I remember coming back to King's Cross and being able to walk. And it was amazing. So the first 4 years was amazing. I had 2 babies within that time. But the band had moved, and I started to get awful acid reflux. So I would wake up at night choking on my own saliva and acid. And in that period, I also started to, so that eating disorder in my head started to creep back in because there was a lot of moms. Everybody was, we were pregnant, and everybody was obsessed with getting back to their pre-baby weight. So that had triggered that part of my brain. And then I would go to the clinic, and they would put saline water in the band to make it tighter. And you would have to drink a glass of water to say if, can the water get through? And that was fine. And sometime I would abuse that. And I would say it could. knowing that I couldn't, because then I know that I can't eat and I would lose more weight. And that is the disorder.
When you say you went to the clinic, you went back to the
Yes.
clinic that did the surgery?
So no, so what they do, they have a traveling clinic. So they have a clinic that comes to London, Belfast, Manchester. So they will come around and adjust these bands and put water in and take the water out at £80 at a time. So it's lucrative. So yeah, so there'll be loads of us coming in.
Sorry, I don't quite follow. What are they putting the water into? Into the gastric band?
Yes. So there's a little bit that they can at the top, and then they can. There's a needle.
So you got a pipe coming out of your stomach that they pour water into?
Just under the skin, so they know how to feel it.
Okay.
So
Goodness me!
it's
All right. So this whole surgery procedure, there's a lot to it. And you said earlier that within 2 weeks I had the surgery.
Yes.
Did they kind of prepare you for
No.
what it might involve? How sick? Because quite serious physically, and also some quite major emotional issues attached to it. Did they kind of prepare you for all this?
No. And a lot of people, and that's the problem now. A lot of people now go to Turkey. There's no pre or post assessment of any type. Nobody ever asked me about my history with eating, nothing like that. So yeah, so that's a big problem, and that's where, to be honest, a lot of my work comes in now. But at that time, nobody asked me. I think, I am a neurodiverse person. I do now think I've got ADHD, so I'm quite compulsive, which would also play into my food behavior too. But so yeah, for me it was great, but I started to abuse it very quickly, and then I started to get really occupied by food, and then I would eat, be sick, and then I realized, something dawned on me that something is going on deeper here. And somebody who worked in mental health field, I always knew there's always a psychological reason why people do things, or why. So then I decided to go and look for a therapist. And I couldn't find anybody that understood the complexities of somebody who has a high BMI, or struggled with their weight, has had weight loss surgery, and could possibly have an underlying eating disorder. So I searched and I.
You mean they've gone through all this and they're still eating too much?
Yes, they couldn't understand.
How can this possibly? Well, so. Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult thing to grasp, actually. Is it a little bit like maybe being an alcoholic? Because
yes,
more people meet alcoholics, maybe. I don't know. So perhaps people can sort of grasp being an alcoholic a little bit more than having an eating disorder. I don't know. Can you try and sort of describe it in those terms, maybe?
Yes, that's brilliant, because I think there is food addiction. It's highly contested. I don't know. I suspect one day, especially with the ultra processed food, I suspect it may be the new 20 years down the line with the cigarette companies. That's a whole nother podcast there, Mike. But so with alcohol, you can live without alcohol. You're reliant on it. But then we can put you on AA, and you can there's abstinence. But with food, when those two parts it triggers the same part, the pleasure part of the brain, the alcohol triggers. Food also does, especially high.
I suppose the difference is you can live without alcohol, but you got to eat.
It's everywhere. It's every time we celebrate with it. You feel sad. You're given food. Everything is constantly shoved down your throat. Literally, sometimes not literally, but so actually, nobody really understands what it feels to be crippled by, or to not have control around sugar, because it's alcohol people can give up, but sugar's everywhere. It's in everything. Food is everywhere. So yeah, I now, when I work with clients, that's the way we work with it. But obviously we now have to learn to be around food and not demonize food.
No.
And just think of food as it's something we need, like a car. We take care of our cars, we take care of our body.
I want to get onto how you help people in a moment, but I interrupted. You were telling your story. You were looking for a therapist to help you in your situation, and you were having trouble. So how did that search go for you?
So I went through. So I would go and I went through many therapists. They were lovely, but then a lot of them were, So then I finally found one who had worked in the NHS for bariatric services. So she had gone and started her own thing. And that's the person who was like, oh. So I remember meeting her and she's like, yeah, tick box. So it was amazing. But I had searched for her for 8 months. And that was the catalyst for me to change careers, change everything, halt everything. And I one day said to my husband, that's it. I'm no longer going to be a social worker. I'm now going to go and retrain, and I'm going to help people who are like me. And that's how my journey started.
Okay. So essentially you found someone that could help you, understood that, there weren't enough people like that because it had taken you months to find that. So you thought, right, there's a need here.
Yes.
I can carry on and help these people. Okay. What happened next then?
So then I went and I signed up to a coaching course, a psychotherapy course, a hypnotherapy course. But one thing I realized was actually a lot of it is not about talking therapy. It was what I needed. A lot of the time, which is needed. Of course, we need to uncover all those, adversities, childhood trauma, all that needed to be dealt with. But actually, for most people who've just, it's become habitual. So food has become it. So food served a purpose, bit like alcohol, bit like any other addiction. At one point, it served a purpose until it became problematic. And so at one point, somebody needed to get through some Dutch courage to go and date, or to be able to do a presentation at work, or to be able to get through something. And that served a purpose until you become reliant on it, and then it becomes the problem. So food for me, I always say to people, I'm so grateful because food was all I had to get me through those times. And I was grateful for it because my emotional needs, nothing else could have met them at that time. My parents didn't know. They had their own trauma, their own issues. So I had nobody to hold me, but I had food, which essentially, kept me alive. So I'm grateful for that. But at some point, we need to unlearn those behaviors. And we know amazing things about the brain now. We know that, neural pathways can be, it can be learned, and it's all habits and behavior change. And a lot of people, luckily the people I work with in the West, it's usually because my mom and dad used to eat that way. I was told to clean the plate, or I was just, there is a fat gene. It's controversial out there. There is people that are a bit like cancer. If the environment's right, that they could be, it's easier to trigger that, having weight issues. But for most people, and especially the first time people have dieted, if they continue just to live that life, they would have just gained weight just by age. Just, we all naturally gain 5 to 10 pounds a year, but as soon as you start to diet, that triggers that, rapidly increases that regains, and that's why diets don't work. Every diet works until you're off it and you go back, and then it doesn't work anymore.
Sure. So if you have someone comes to you in a similar position, actually, as you were a while ago, either just before weight loss surgery or just after weight loss surgery, how do you help them? What's the process?
Is, with a lot of people, sometimes, especially if you're carrying over, let's say, you've got over 100 pounds to lose, or over 8 stones, 9 stones to lose. Sometimes you're so occupied by that weight needing to come off, because we live in a society where we want everything today. I say to people, use this opportunity I work with a lot of people who are hoping to having weight loss injections, because that's another thing now, isn't it? Use this time to actually use both of them. Use the tools, because you're going to need some tools. When you're that overweight, dieting alone is not going to get you there. But because your set point, because your biology, and we need to understand that at some point, for a huge part of the population, weight loss, move more, eat less is not going to work, because biology is at play. So let's work together so we change those habits, and you're off this yo-yo dieting vicious cycle of on a diet, off a diet, on a, so then you've recovered, and you can live with food for the rest of your life, having a good relationship with your body, with your mind, with food, and you're not occupied, because a lot of people are, and there's a lot of shame and a lot of guilt that, that inner critic is so loud. And society, the narrative with popular media, with the food companies, is that it's a personal responsibility. And I don't think it's personal responsibility, especially for children who have, childhood obesity is growing at a rapid rate. And those children, when those fat cells separate and, when develop, they don't go back. There's no way of getting rid of them. They'll always want feeding.
Yeah.
So for those children as adults, losing weight to a normal weight is, it's the likelihood
extremely
of being
difficult.
Sure. Yes.
Sure. Do you get people that you help to involve their wider circle, if possible, their family and their friends? And in fact, did you do that when you were going through this yourself? And how can you get them as part of your team, get them on board?
I think family have got, and it's in families. There's a history. Usually, everybody has seen a mom, an auntie, a granny, desperate with their wanting to lose weight and hating their body. So there's a really negative, people being called names by their family, or families have tried to shame. And that happened in my family. Tried to shame you into wanting to lose the weight. People. I had a client, and she said, my dad said, every stone, I'll give you £100 for every stone you lose. And so there's families with all the best intentions, but then you're giving that person another chance to fail. So in a positive way, now a lot of it is self-esteem. A lot of people who struggle with their weight also really it impacts their job opportunities, their confidence with relationships, in every way. So actually rebuilding that person's self-esteem and self-worth, realizing actually I am worthy regardless of what size my genes are, is the most important step. And the minute that you think you're worthy as a human being, then that's the minute that you're gonna stop that people pleasing tendencies, or your boundaries are always crossed by everybody, because you put everybody else before you. So those are the things we work on, is actually why are you eating? What is the pattern? Because a lot of it is usually you get that email from the boss, and before you know it, there's a box of biscuits that have finished, or there's environmental issues at home. And that's what I work with most people. And if the rest of the family wants to come on board, is great, and we work with the whole family. But usually it's about the person actually taking care of themselves and being okay with saying no, because a lot of people are not. And a lot of people are neurodiverse. A lot of people are empaths that feel very deeply, have a sense of real responsibility towards a lot of people. So they're usually taking care of elderly parents. They're usually parents themselves. They're usually the people that give the most to society, but then the least to themselves.
That's interesting, actually. So do you think there's some overlap with people that are naturally kind of giving, have a natural tendency to look after, well, almost everyone, and
Yes,
can potentially suffer from this?
Yeah, we self-abandon. A lot of people abandon their needs, our needs, to and also to feel needed. There's usually an underlining thing there about wanting to be needed, and why. And then there is childhood adversity there. There's trauma also for some people. I work with a lot of people who've been through domestic abuse, and there's food had become their thing. And with a lot of weight loss patients in the community, also there's a thing of counter transference. Oh, I didn't say that properly, but transferring their addiction. So then alcohol, shopping, sex, gambling, whatever it may be. So we move from one addiction to another, to another, to another.
So, I mean, what I'm getting from our chat is that this is not a straightforward thing. It's not easy to fix. So, getting help from someone like you who's been through it,
yes,
who really understands what's going on, seems like probably a good start. So, Safi, how do you help people? I mean, do you help them face to face, or do you help them online using Zoom?
So mainly online. I've got people that I work with now who live in Australia. So it's been amazing. You know, I work with all sorts of different people, but mainly online. And and I love working with the community because I'm not just using theory. Theory is great, and anybody who has theory, it's wonderful. But I also, that lived experience of being really, I can understand because I have been there. I'm only a few steps ahead. You know, I'm 9 years into my journey, and I haven't weighed myself for about 3 years of that. And
really? Is that part of the process?
For me, it's
not fixating on the actual weight.
Yeah, because a lot of people do, and I am part of the community. And a lot of people, you know, we traumatize each other because they sometimes we just want to go back, and our brain wants to do what's easy. And our brain is so conditioned to know, actually, if we restrict or if we go back to, a diet club that we're going to use points, it wants to go back to that because that's the easier thing to do. But actually, the harder bit is long term is what's going to really help you recover. So usually it's a lot of, we go right back. We do extensive assessment on your childhood. Where did this, because there is a trigger at some point with food, a bit
like mine.
There will
be a trigger, yeah.
There is a trigger. There's one day something happened and food kept you safe.
So Safi, let me ask, you've actually written a book about your experiences, and so I can imagine that this had two objectives, sort of to help you, but also to help other people get over this issue.
Yes, definitely, Mike. And I think it was just an amazing way to put it all on paper. And it was great. It was very therapeutic for me. And the book is called, it's a lot. I have two wonderful contributors that have been in the field of eating disorders for maybe 3 decades, one of the lady. So I really wanted to have that really solid evidence-based theory there also. But then I also wanted to share my story and my recovery. And so then obviously, one size fits nobody. Everybody, what worked for
Everyone has a different story, yeah.
Yes, but I would have loved to see my story on paper. And I always think about that younger Safi and what would have benefited her. And I think it would have saved me a lot of heartache, a lot of money, a lot of dieting trauma, a lot of, if I had that book. Within the UK, we're very behind. A lot of stuff to do with weight loss surgery, to do with weight loss injections now is very Americanized. It's very, we're behind. We're behind America, Canada and Australia, which is ahead of us, maybe possibly by a decade. So in the UK, there's very little resources out there.
A lot to go. All right. So Safi, when is the book out? And also, if people are listening to this, how can they get more information about this field? And also, if they think, okay, Safi sounds like someone that could help me, how can they get in touch with you?
So the book will be out in autumn. It's called Keep It Off, Healing from Dieting Trauma, Rebuilding a Relationship After Bariatric Surgery. But actually, it could be for anybody that's had the kind of relationship that I've spoken about with food. So I offer a 30-minute chat to anybody to make sure, because a lot of therapy, a lot of coaching is about that chemistry, to make sure that I am the right person and there is that, therapeutic relationship. And I will give you a link, Mike, and I'm sure you can put it under your show. But I'm on Gastric Mindset on Instagram. I have a podcast, the only bariatric podcast in the UK, and it's also called Gastric Mindset. I'm Gastric Mindset everywhere.
Okay. So if people search for Gastric Mindset, they will find you.
Yes, indeed.
Look, Safi, thank you very much indeed for chatting, because I think this is something that affects a surprising number of people, and it ruins lives. So helping people get over this is a very useful thing to do. Indeed.
It's just the numbers are just gonna get higher. I think if obesity, the rates, and if so, the dieting culture, the way it's been, hasn't worked because the numbers say otherwise. So we need to find a kinder, more compassionate way to work with people who are struggling. And thank you so much for having me, Mike.
Thank you very much. You're an absolutely wonderful guest. Thank you.
Thank you very much to my guest. That's Safi Abdi, talking about her issues with weight and how she can help others with the same issues. Thank you very much to you for listening, and have a healthy week. Until next week.
Thanks for listening to the Relax Back UK show. Join me, Mike Dilk, again next week for more fascinating interviews and chat. If you're listening to the podcast version, please subscribe, like, and share it with your family and friends. And have a healthy week. Until next week.